So I wanted to kind of do an introduction to the channel for people who are new and kind of speak on, myself, the channel, Amharic as a language in general, and just things to expect moving forward. So about me, I have Ethiopian parents, but I was born in the US. I did not want to learn the language when I was younger, which I kind of regret now a little bit. Pretty typical story of where I was black in predominantly white schools. I didn't want to be the African kid. That's a little bit about why I can't speak the language. Why the channel is called Learning How to Speak Amharic. Learning how to learn is something that's really important to me, a skill set I improve later on. I'm kind of hoping some of how I explain and break down the language will sort of leave an impression of maybe some learning strategies in general. But the most important reason is because How to Speak Amharic was taken. There's another YouTube channel with that name. Me, I'm at 20 to 25% understanding of Amharic. I started at like 0 to 3%. I'm saying 20 to 25% because that's the number I would put for myself. My aunt told me this. One of my other aunts told me I'm at 50%, but I think she's just trying to be really nice. I've been learning the language on and off again for 2 years. This is like stretching it. Well, I haven't really been learning that much. I mean, like the last time I really was trying to focus and study on it, I was actually working as a medical scribe and studying for the MCAT, and I was trying to learn this language, and what I took away from that was that doing all three at once was way too difficult. I divide up which one I focus on. And then kind of this 20-25% understanding. I think because I'm closer to a beginner, there's some advantages I have in explaining certain things. I think there's some psychological term for it, but I kind of understand the growing pains it takes to get through the language. So, and English is my primary language, so I can kind of explain it from that perspective. But it is kind of funny that I'm at 20-25% understanding of a language, and I'm going to try and help people become fluent in it. About the language, I don't know how to stress how difficult of a language Amharic is. I think individual concepts are not that bad, relatively speaking, but because there's so many, it makes it hard to learn. And trying to demonstrate how difficult it is, there's a group called the Foreign Service Institute. They train foreign diplomats from America to go to other countries and do governmental work. But before they go, they train them how to speak a foreign language, and it's a really intense program. It takes like, I think 8 weeks or something. They don't speak anything but that language. They're in the classroom for like 6 to 8 hours a day. They have homework afterward. So luckily, because it's a government agency, there is a free textbook, and this resource has really been the lifesaver. So there are 2 textbooks, and they're not that difficult to find. Like if you just look up, yeah, here it is. It's free. You can download the PDF. This is the book. There's 2 books. The first book is how to speak the language. The second book is kind of related to reading the language. I mentioned it later, but I'm not teaching how to read the language. I actually do think it's helpful, and it's actually way easier to learn how to read the language than try to speak it, to be honest. So kind of going back to the FSI, they have a textbook and stuff that helps, but they also rank how difficult it is for English speakers to learn different languages. I don't know how official this is, but these are the different language categories. The higher the category, the more difficult the language. Category 1 is French, Spanish. Category 2, German, some other language probably also. Category 4, Amharic is supposed to be here in some places, but like different groups have different rankings for them. Like here, it's a group 3 language for whatever group this is. Basically just trying to show that like this is the highest level is category 5, where it's like Chinese and Japanese, and Amharic is like just below that in terms of difficulty. And then in terms of the hours it takes to learn, the number varies a lot, but they're saying like it can take like this place has like 1100 hours. Here for group 3 languages to get to like average aptitude, it takes 480 hours. This group again ranks as a category 3 language. It takes 1100 class hours, what they say. So I don't really know which one is the most accurate, but I'm gonna guess it probably you need like this many hours and you'll be pretty decent. You can even try and just do the math of trying to reach this number of hours of study, and you can realize it takes a pretty long time. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier. There are not very many resources. This is like a third world country. A lot of people can speak the language just intuitively because they live with their parents or lived in the community. So there aren't that many resources for it. So I'm trying to create them. One of them being this YouTube series. I'm trying to make an Anki deck based on the 3,000 most common words in Amharic with their Fidel. And I have like the words in the Fidel and some sort of like English pronunciation also, just to like, hopefully that's actually a bad example word. Yeah, so this way you can practice the words, and I'll explain why I picked 3,000 later. So I'm trying to work on this, but it's actually been really slow because my pronunciation is poor, and I'm going to explain later why pronunciation is kind of important, actually really important for this language. So I really want a native Amharic speaker to do the pronunciation, so if anyone knows anyone that can help out, let me know. There are also Amharic tutors that are cheap. Yeah, so I just like, if you look up Amharic tutors, like look, $2 an hour, $4 an hour. This is actually inflation. I'm not gonna lie, these used to be like $2 to $3. The quality and experience level of each of these tutors depends. Like this girl, she's from Ethiopia. 4 to 7 hours is a little bit about her. And yeah, so getting an Amharic tutor is not that expensive. And there are some YouTube videos that help, and I'm actually gonna come to this video in a little bit. And you can just look up things and find your own resources and see if they help. Outline of my videos. So my course is gonna be based around the textbook and basically explaining it, because the textbook I think does a really poor job of explaining certain concepts. So it's me deciphering what they're trying to say And then some of it is even like just taking a different route of explaining things from the textbook because, they take certain angles that I don't think are best for explaining things. I'm not teaching Fidel, but there's a great textbook for it that I'll link in the YouTube video. Full disclosure, my aunt made the workbook, but I still think it's really, really good. And I used to have an mnemonic teacher, and that kind of helps me with how I would explain and break down things, because working with her and comparing it to how the textbook explained things, I think sometimes her methods are better, and then sometimes I'll even use my own methods to explain things. Overview of the language. So I just think this video is like amazing. I like doing an intro, kind of let the guy do the explaining.
And there are glottalized consonants, or ejective consonants. Glottalized consonants are produced by closing and reopening the glottis, the space between your vocal cords, while making the consonant sound. When transliterated using Latin characters, they usually have a dot underneath them to distinguish them from their non-glottalized equivalents. Let's compare a plain consonant with its glottalized equivalent.
T, tera, terra.
I thought he did a great job explaining this. It's a glottalized language, so there's like ch, p, k, t, t, versus like t, s, k, p, ch. There's like a softer sound to it. And words can be basically exactly the same, except there's a difference in this like glottalization letter. For me, it's actually really tough to hear, but it's an important part of learning the language.
All consonants can be short or long. Long meaning that the consonant is double in length. The distinction between short and long consonants is important because sometimes the meaning of words is distinguished by the length of the consonant. For example,
Ale,
this means he said.
alle,
This means there is.
wana,
This means swimming.
wana.
This means important. So in both cases, the length of the consonant distinguishes the meaning of the words. Doubled consonants are not distinguished in writing, but in context, Amharic speakers have little trouble with that.
Again, great explanation from him. These words are the same, except like the L is set for a little bit shorter than this one. Again, I really basically cannot hear the difference between these two words personally. And people in mnemonic speak so fast that I don't know how this version of it is longer than this version. And also in Fidel, this like double consonant thing is not in the Fidel lettering, but the people, again, they just know it from like this W-A-N-A, like these two words are probably spelled exactly the same, but they can tell from context that this is the doubled consonant because people are talking about something that's important rather than, something about swimming.
Sentence structure. First, let's look at an equational sentence using the verb to be.
ልጁ አጭር ነው።
This means the boy is short. Word for word, it's boy, the, short, is. U is a definite article.
ልጅ፣
Is boy,
ልጁ።
is the boy. Notice that the verb to be is at the end, and the adjective comes before it. Amharic is a verb-final language, so in predicative sentences, the word order is SV, or OV, or SOV. Of course, some sentences have no object, just a subject and an intransitive verb. For example,
ልጁ ወደቀ።
this sentence means the child fell. Word for word is child, the, he fell. So this is the subject and this is the verb. And here's a sentence that does have a direct object.
What I wanted to kind of take away is that like the language is backwards from English, like a little bit. Like the verbs always come at the end of the sentence. So the subject, then the verb. Sometimes it can be object versus verb, and he'll explain that. And then sometimes the subject, the object, and then the verb of the sentence. I really don't like English grammatical words, but to be honest, they're actually pretty helpful for explaining the language. I'm not gonna lie.
Here's a sentence that does have a direct object.
አዳኙ አንበሳ ገደለ።
It means the hunter killed a lion. Word for word, it's hunter, the, lion, he killed. Here's the subject, the object, and the verb. Something we can add to this sentence is the optional direct object marker.
አዳ-
So this is actually the perfect sentence I was thinking of that he kind of mentions before, but the verb is always going to be at the end of the sentence. Hunter is Adan. Ooh, they call it definite suffix, and then that's like a fancy grammatic word, but it just makes something become the blank. So Adan is hunter, with a U at the end, it's Adanu, which means the hunter. I'm probably pronouncing the word incorrectly. But like Beit is house. Beitu is the house. So it's not that complicated. That's what definite suffixes are. That can also mean his, just to, I don't want to like jump into too many other things, but Beit U can be the house or his house, and you can normally tell from the context of the sentence. And actually this verb at the end will have a lot of clues to that. Anbasan. So the reason you know that this, like the line isn't the subject, like it's not the lion killed the hunter, is because the word has this N ending at the end, which marks it as the object of the sentence. And objects of the sentence are kind of hard to explain, but they're basically receiving the action of the verb. So this is kind of grotesque, but the verb of being killed is being received by the line, which is why it has an N at the end.
አንበሳን ገደለ
If you use the direct object marker, then it's also possible to place the object at the beginning of the sentence, making it OSV.
That's what I wanted to say. Like, if you wanted to flip it, you can. Like, you just know that this is the object of the sentence because it ends with an N. And because this one doesn't have an N at the end, and it's talking about he killed, then you know it must be talking about, oh, this hunter guy is the one who did the action, because he doesn't have an N at the end of the word. If you wanted to say like Anbasa Adanun Gedela, I'm probably pronouncing it really badly, but that would mean like the lion killed the hunter, and then you could even like flip the order of that, which I'm kind of getting scrambled brain trying to keep track of each different version. But you can say subject object verb or object subject verb. Either way is fine, but the N really helps tell which is the object of the sentence.
አንበሳን አዳኙ ገደለ
And now let's try adding an adjective to this sentence.
አዳኙ ትልቅ አንበሳ ገደለ
This sentence now means the hunter killed a big lion. And you can see that the adjective is placed before the noun.
Yeah, basically the adjective comes right before whatever it modifies. So if it was like, this is, big lion, so tillik comes right before the word for lion. But if you want to say like the big hunter killed the lion, you just put like tillik here right before it. And I think that's always true. I could be wrong, but that should be mostly true.
Hunter killed a big lion. And you can see that the adjective is placed before the noun. The previous sentences all have an explicit subject, but there can also be no explicit subject. For example, this sentence meaning, he opened the door.
በሩን ከፈተ
Word for word it's door, the, direct object marker, he opened. No explicit subject is necessary here, because we know from the form of the verb that it refers to the third person masculine singular. So this sentence is just OV.
So this was a really important point that I'm happy he explained with his colors and his diagrams. So verbs can indicate the subject within them automatically, and he kind of shows this more later. So you don't need a subject. The verb, because of how it's conjugated, implies the subject. It's he opened the door. It can be she opened the door. I opened the door. So I guess coming back to the slides a little bit, there are 7 typical subjects in Amadic. There's an 8th one, but I'm not going to... The 8th one's for respect, and I don't really want to teach that because it's just unnecessary. It's already hard enough. But I, he, she, you male, you female, y'all, we, they. Those are the 8 subjects that can do things. So in this case, there could be I opened the door, he opened the door, which is what they're showing here. She opened the door, you male, you female, we, they, y'all. And so you don't need a subject to indicate that like you do in English. Like you really need to say like he, she, whatever is doing the action. The verb itself will imply that action. And it's the direct object here. It's receiving the action. Funny enough, it's actually kind of important here in a way because like Efeta, my pronunciation is bad. I should go back and make this much more clear. It's actually very important. The he subject can also be an it subject. So like if you wanted to say like the car did something, like the car opened, like the car is the subject and it's doing the action, and you can indicate that by using the he, third person masculine singular conjugation. It'll be the same. And I think a lot of other foreign languages are very similar to that, where like he and it are pretty similar. And that kind of logic is also why like the door can also be his door in terms of interpretation, because he and objects like it, the kind of share the same conjugational like prefixes and suffixes. Like this you here would be the suffix that they share. If you just say this word by itself, that's a sentence. Like that means he opened whatever. It could be a door, a can, a lid, whatever he opened. It kind of also implies like he opened it. If you don't have like a specific thing that you're like explaining here, like he opened it.
And that brings us to verbs. Similar to in other Semitic languages, the verb consists of a stem and suffixes which indicate the person, gender, and number of the subject. Let's take a look at this example verb, meaning tell us about the doer of the action.
I think I'm gonna cut it about it. He does a great job explaining the video. You guys should go watch it. But again, explaining the 7 subjects that are possible. He does a different order than me, but he broke has this suffix. She broke gives it this suffix. You male broke gives it this suffix. Different suffixes attached to this stem word will give you different meanings. So it's really plug and chug. It's about memorizing these suffixes, and then sometimes there are prefixes for different types of conjugations. And then if you get this root for the verb, you can basically say anything. So I'll teach you guys how to like get this root verb, and then it's about memorizing the prefixes and suffixes and remembering what they mean. These are like, it's called imperfect, the fancy grammatical term, but these are basically future things. There's a certain prefix and suffix, and that means like he will break, or she will break, you will break. The reason he's putting like he breaks is because a modic sometimes will have things that are happening in the moment, and it will talk about it using the imperfect future tense. Hopefully that's a little bit of a decent intro. A bit more overview of the language. So there are 50 chapters in this textbook. The chapters get shorter like the further in you get. The grammatical notes is where the actual explanation of some important part of the language comes in, and then it gives you some drills, some Q&As to practice using different things. I think with 30 chapters you can basically speak the language for the most part, and then level it takes them get to intermediate level of the language. So I've been trying to figure this out, and different resources say different things, but I think about 2,000 to 3,000 words is what it takes to be at an intermediate level. And again, I'm trying to make this, Anki deck of 3,000 words. There's like 3,116 in it right now. Okay, to be pretty good, I think you just need 500 verbs and 1,500 nouns and adjectives, and you'll be pretty solid. Like for me, that'd be my goal, but I hope that's a decent introduction and a little bit about what we'll be moving forward. This is supposed to be like a top-down view. I'll get into more like details and explain different things later.